Yo, what's up? My name's Jerry, and I'm here to break down the project file of my new song, On the Floor, that just got released on Hexagon and Generation Hex. Alright, let's head on into the studio and open up Ableton. Alright, here we are inside of Ableton. I've got the projects pulled up. The first thing I want to go over are the drums, and they sound like this. So you can hear that they're really punchy, and the main reason for that is the kick drum. As the name says, it's an accidental kick that I made, so while I was working on the song, I was auditioning a few different samples to see which one fit best in the mix, and I applied a frequency shifter to the one track to lower the fundamental frequency of the kick, and sometimes frequency shifter causes a little bit of a different timbre in the sound every time you play it, so I went to resample it, but I accidentally had another one of the kick channels playing, so this kick is two kicks layered together. And normally I don't like to do that because it can cause some phasing issues in the low end, but it worked out in this case. Next thing I want to go over is this call and response that plays between the 808 rim and the percussion fill at the end of every second bar. This is a common theme throughout the song, and if I zoom out, you can kind of see that it happens throughout. Then at the end of every 8 bars, instead of having the percussion fill, I have this house snare, which is what the channel is called, and a long fill with at the end of it a trap snare playing. There's also a lot of percussion, which I call the tops, in this track that helps drive the track forward and add some groove to it. Here's how they sound. So the last thing I want to go over with the drums is this trap section. The whole section itself is kind of a different dynamic to the track, but I had to pick some different samples, like a new kick and different hi-hats, to give it that new feel. Next thing I want to talk about is this subgroup that I have here. This is a part of my workflow. So whenever I have a patch that requires a dedicated sub or a separate sub, I'll duplicate the patch. So I'll duplicate the serum track or whatever synth I'm using. I'll keep the pitch envelope and all of the envelopes that affect amplitude and things. Then I'll take off the filters, change the wavetable to a sine wave, and I'll also remove the effects. And then I process all my subs similarly. The way I process the group then is applying this kick tight preset. I learned this from the producer Crane. He's got some dope sample packs, so you definitely got to check him out if you haven't already. I'll add some distortion. I'm using serum effects this time. Then I'll cut off the high end to make sure I don't get too many upper harmonics, but I keep everything below 300. Then a little bit more saturation and my sidechain. The main bass that plays in the intro, outro, and the build-ups is this 808, and it's from Nitty Gritty's pack. He's a really dope producer, so definitely check him out if you haven't already. But if I turn off all the processing, this is how it sounds. So to do those 808 bends, I went inside a simpler, turned on the glide, and automated the glide time. So if I select a region here or have a note overlapping, and then you look in the bottom left corner, below the simpler, below the resonance knob, you'll see there's a couple numbers, and that corresponds to the length of time of the highlighted region. So I automated the time to go from 119 milliseconds, like in this first overlap. And then if I move over to a spot where there's a quarter note pitch bend, I change that to 476 milliseconds, which is the length of that region. And with the processing turned on, it sounds like this. So moving over to the sidechain and going over some of the basses in the drop, the two that I want to talk about are the tweak bass, which is kind of the main bass which pitches up each time, and also the distortion stab, which is the start of every 8 or 16 bars. The tweak bass sounds like this. So if I open up the MIDI, you can see that there's notes overlapping, and that's what creates the pitch bend effect. So inside of Serum, I have the mono and legato turned on with the portamento time set to 238 milliseconds. And similar to the 808, that's the length of time that the notes overlap. So if I highlight the region, you can see down in the left corner that it's 238 milliseconds. For the patch itself, it's a sine wave with white noise, a phase 12 minus filter, diode 1 distortion, and then multiband compression. And I've got the high band turned down, so that's a nice little tip. It's at 19% here. And then moving on to the effects for the processing, the big thing that gives it the vocal or formant sound and character is this effector from FL Studio. So I'm automating the X and Y parameters, which are controlling the phaser, and I'm also automating the dry, wet of the mix. Another thing I did is I used a glitch sample from Virtual Riot's pack. I really could have used anything for this, but I just went with this one. And I used a vocoder with the carrier external set to the main tweak bass patch in Serum. And without the processing, it sounds like this. And with the processing and vocoder, it sounds like this. Adding in that layer gives the high end a unique timbre, and it also adds some grittiness, which I felt was missing from the original patch. So the other bass that I want to talk about is the disto stab, and that plays at the start of every call and response. So I'm just going to remake it for you live so you guys will know how it's made. So it's a sine wave. In this case, I like the analog BD sine because if you turn the wavetable position up, you get some upper harmonics. I got the randomness pulled down, AC hum noise on, but any noise works. And then in the effects section, it's a tube distortion with the drive pulled up all the way to like 90 or 95%. So turning on my MIDI keyboard and arming the track, it sounds like this. Some other details on the drop that I want to go over. The first one is the scratch sample, and this adds some nice groove to the track. So it sounds like this. Then I've got some of these zips down here that I added in, and you can make these in Serum, but in this case it worked best to use a sample, and I applied frequency shifters and flattened them a couple times, but here they are. Then you already know I got those laser beams. Last thing I want to go over are the vocal chops and the vocal itself. So the vocal chops are in that trap breakdown where I showed you the drums earlier, and they complement the beat. So here's how they sound. Bass on the bass on the make you lose. Bass on the make you lose. So going down to the trap beat, I've got this Medicine hi-hat sample that I chopped up, and the sample name says it sounds like Res, which is so true. But I tried to make sure that the way I chopped it up matched the vocal chops and that they complemented each other. Here's how it sounds. So honestly, I can't remember which one I had made first, but I think I had the trap beat and then I added the vocal chops, and the final touch was the Medicine sample. So it took me a little while to chop it up and get it right so that it complemented the vocal chops the right way. But I wanted to go for the overall joyride vibe with the high-pitched, low-pitched vocals and then the trap beat. So the other thing I want to go over with the vocals is that I have this disto layer. So that's just a very overdriven, distorted version of the vocals. And I'm cutting out the low end and high end, so you got a lot of the mids, which add some body to the actual sample. And it's playing throughout the whole song, but it sounds like this. And like I said, that's just kind of layering it and adding a little bit more depth, a little more grit, a little more body to the vocal, and helping it throughout the mix and track.